Hey, good morning, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel, and you're watching TechStrong TV. Welcome to our show for today, Thursday, April 16th. You know what? If you caught yesterday's show, it was jam-packed of breaking news stories, great interviews, with C-level CEO folks, and just some all-around great information from opening to closing. And today's show promises to be just as good. We'll be doing the usual today. In that, I'll give you a quick breakdown of what we're going to have. We'll have a bunch of segments. Among them, I'm going to be interviewing my good friend Mike Rothman, founder of Securosis and DisruptOps. And we're going to talk a little bit about, the state of security industry, the security industry right now from kind of one of the ultimate security industry insiders, Mike. And what Mike sees going forward here, what might be the lasting effects of COVID and economy and stuff like that. Then we're going to jump over to an interview I had with Matt Rose from Checkmarx. And, Checkmarx is one of the real powerhouses in application security, static dynamic testing, et cetera. And Matt will bring us up to date on what's happening there. We'll then take a quick break for the news. And then Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor, has two great interviews coming up today. One is with John Mertic, director of the Open Mainframe Project, part of the Linux Foundation, talking about, all of a sudden the acute need of COBOL programmers. And then secondly, we've got my friends Derek Week and DJ Schleen from Sonatype, who are going to go over the recently announced DevSecOps community survey. And I imagine they'll plug, I believe it's on Friday, is the spring break version, I think they're calling it, of All Day DevOps, and you can check that out on there. Then, after Charlene, we're going to jump over to Mitchell in the analyst corner. And Mitchell has a great guest today, probably one of the best he's ever had. It's me. And Mitchell and I are going to talk about the recent announcement from Google and Apple to help us track contact vectors from people infected with COVID. And we'll talk about what this means from a privacy and rights issue and other angles. So stay tuned for that. And then rounding things up is our channel roundup with Mike Rizard. And Mike always has some great advice and information that he's doling out in these, so stay tuned for that. And I'll be back to wrap it up. So, like I said, it's a great day for news here on TechStrong TV. Also, if you didn't already do it, head over to TechStrong.tv. And if you can sign up for our Slack channel, if you want to interact with any of the speakers, the hosts, any suggestions, comments, if you want to maybe be interviewed for TechStrong TV, you can do so on the Slack channel. Ask us and we'll reach out from there. And also I wanted to just give a quick shout out. Yesterday we did our second work from home fitness with Jeremy Jones, and that was again well received. We have broken those out separately so you can watch them on demand on TechStrong.tv. And you know what, whether you're working from home or not, your gym is closed, you need to be getting regular exercise. Jeremy's doing a great job there, man. So it's like getting private training right in your house. Check that out. And we'll be back after this commercial.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, back here on TechStrong TV. I hope you like that commercial on TechStrong Con, which is coming June 4th. And you can sign up now. We've already got a great bunch of speakers up on the site. You can check it out. But for now, as I mentioned, I'm going to jump over to an interview I did with my good friend, Mike Rothman, founder of Securosis and Disrupt Ops. And I mean, Mike's a true security industry insider. He knows what's going on, when it's going on. And Mike's going to share with us a lot of his views on where the industry's going and what we're seeing. And of course, I put my 2 cents in too. So let's head over to our interview with Mike.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, TechStrong TV, and thanks for joining us for this segment. I'm really, really happy to have one of my good friends in the cyberspace. We used to call it InfoSec, actually. I don't know about this cyber thing. But anyway, one of my good friends in the industry. He has been an analyst probably for 15, 20 years at Giga, and then him and 2 friends of mine, Rich Mogul, Adrian Lane, started a firm called Securosis, which is still functioning and doling out analysis and advice for everyone in the industry, as well as one of the co-founders of a cloud DevSecOps company called Disrupt Ops, Mike Rothman. Mike, welcome to TechStrong TV.
My friend, how are you? And
I'm
by the way,
good.
we're doing a webcast. At Disrupt Us, we're doing a webcast with you guys this week on Thursday. So let's hump that a little bit.
You know what? Okay, we have a webinar Thursday. We'll be sure to put the URL in so the people can grab the URL when they watch this, because this is actually going to play on Wednesday, so it's perfect timing. We'll have that ready to rock and roll. Mike, what is the webinar on? As long as you started it on this, let us finish that thought.
Yeah, so it's really about understanding, kind of how to deal with your cloud security posture. So we're actually partnered with a firm called NetSpy, and they're in the application penetration testing business. So we're really talking about how do you do cloud security from the top down and the bottom up. Right, so you have your pen testers come in and really find where the holes are, and then you can certainly fix those holes once. That's fine, right? But what you really want to do is have a systematic program to ensure that you are on top of your misconfigurations, on top of your attacks all the time. So we're going to talk about how Disrupt Ops plays into, kind of not just fixing one time the things that your pen testers are going to find, but also how you build that into a systematic cloud security operations program to ensure that you're always on top of that.
That's an excellent topic, number one. But number two, I find that's one of the problems we're running into. When we look at the security industry for 20, 25 years, pen testers find things, they give you a report of what they found, you fix what they found, but then they'll find a similar thing next year, the same thing, because systematically we're just plugging the hole instead of getting to the root causes of things so that we never see that problem again, right? That we kind of wipe that out. And not to make a bad analogy, but it's similar to a strategy we need to come up with to fight, this COVID coronavirus situation, right? We need more of a longer term solution, and how is that going to affect us?
Alan, that is a very apt analogy, right? Because one of the things that's been very problematic with trying to get on top of, kind of the spread of coronavirus and, who has the COVID disease has been a lack of testing. Right. And when you start thinking about, kind of what you have to do in order to understand your cloud security posture, it's all about testing. Right. And we would call that assessment. Right. Making sure that you've got, kind of the right controls in place, that they're configured effectively, that you're not outside of the boundaries of the governance policies that you've put in place. So there really are a lot of specific analogies there with once you have the information, where you're vulnerable, where you're exposed, if you're infected, right? Then you can decide what actions you want to take on the back end of that, right? Maybe it's fix it and, you kind of joke, hey, the pen testers find things and you just fix them. Well, that's kind of a bit of a leap of faith, right? The pen testers do find stuff. We found that not everybody fixes a lot of the things that are there. So really what you want to do, especially in cloud, since it is all automated, since it is accessible, accessible via, kind of APIs, and you can orchestrate a lot of different security tools to achieve your goal. What you really want to do is kind of think about it more from a continuous assessment and really more importantly, remediation. Because one of the jokes we always tell is, nobody gets up in the morning and says, God, I wish I had more alerts. Right, said by nobody ever. Right, nobody gets
or another agent on my machine.
Well, that's the other one that people don't get up and do that. But people don't want more alerts, right? What they want are better alerts, and they want the ability to fix the issues that are identified through those alerts much more effectively, much more accurately, and really much more consistently. And so that's where automation really fits into a lot of the security operational motions that we start to see as organizations really embrace much more of a cloud native philosophy.
Absolutely. And look, if you're going to do these things at scale and we're going to do them effectively, I just don't see another way where it works if it's not automated, kind of built in like that.
You and me both, my friend. That's why we kind of put our money where our mouth is, and spun the technology. Right, we spun the technology out of Securosis into DisruptOps, and we've been building the company. Just announced we had raised a Series A, so the timing on that was great. And again, what we're really seeing is we're a lot closer to folks understanding not only do I have to make sure that I'm on top of my cloud security posture, I need much more consistent, resilient, and agile mechanisms to fix all these things, because I just can't have carbon in the way. If I'm sitting there in the queue of all the stuff that my responders have to deal with, you're never going to get to these things. And in cloud, you blink and most of your data is in Chechnya or wherever the hell it goes.
Romania, wherever, you're right. But Mike, the thing about it is also, it's a mindset. As much as it's great to have tools like a DisruptOps and a service, whatever you want to call it, as a tool or a service, the mindset has to acknowledge that hey, we can't have carbon in the middle of it, as you mentioned, right? The idea of taking a pen test report and checking off, one by one as we remediate and fix it's archaic. It's barbaric even. It's just a recipe, right? It just don't work.
On the scale of barbarism, that's probably pretty low.
Okay, that's worse. Yeah, you're right. It's not cruel and unusual. It might be cruel and unusual punishment.
I think your point, is well taken in that really DevOps in general, and then when you start thinking about layering security into those processes, really requires a cultural evolution. Right? A lot of folks are used to being, you have to be able to, one, think about the problem differently in terms of, I don't have to do this myself all the time, but you also have to develop.
Not I don't have to, I must not.
No,
I must not do it
but
myself.
It all gets back
I can't
to
do it myself.
Right? It all gets back to trust. And where a lot of folks, we call them, kind of the leaders, right? The folks that have leaned into DevOps and kind of those early adopters, they got there, they've retooled their entire process, their culture really embraces those kinds of techniques, and that's great. And, even in big companies, you have small groups that are getting there, but a lot of the more operational motions continue to be hamstrung by folks not being comfortable with any level of automation. So one of the things we've done, and this is actually very cool, we've done within DisruptOps, is it's something we call decision technology. And basically what that is it's the ability to perform and undertake the automations via a ChatOps interface. So what ends up happening is, as opposed to an alert just coming into your environment, and then, the machine doing things and you don't know why they did them, you don't have any context. In a lot of cases, that feedback isn't brought back to the developers. It's just very problematic because when something goes wrong with the automation, you have no idea why. So what decision technology does is it delivers the alert and the options that you have right into your operational interface. Right now it's Slack and Microsoft Teams. And that gives you the ability to say, I want to delay this for 20 minutes, an hour, 2 days, because I need to check into this more. I want to undertake this right away. But what it does is it provides that human intervention without adding a lot of friction to give folks the comfort that the machine isn't just doing stuff. I'm in control of what it's doing. It's doing it under my auspices. And then when you get more comfortable with it, which should be a half a dozen times, right? The same thing happens a half a dozen times. The machine does its job as it's supposed to. Everybody's happy. Then you can turn it on automatically, but only then, right? And we found that's just been such a huge constraint to folks adopting automation, is just not having comfort with what's actually getting done. So the decision technology really enables that level of human intervention that we believe is going to make a big difference in terms of the adoption of automation in a cloud security context.
You know, Mike, what's old is new again. This is not dissimilar to the argument I used to have with people about IDS and IPS, right? They were buying IPSs and then not blocking anything automatically. They had to build up a trust where they're, you know, even the most asinine, obvious things that needed to be blocked, they wouldn't block automatically at first. It's a process, as they say. So let's not ignore the elephant in the room, though. Look, the world's kind of changed a little bit since the last time I saw you in February. But here's the good news. Well, maybe good news for you and some of us in the tech space is this is really accelerating the move to the cloud, and people are now recognizing, hey, if I'm going to move to the cloud in a big way, I need to have a good base, a good foundation of security and hygiene, right? And posture, processes, tools that are going to allow me that level of trust you're referencing, right? And at the same time, though, here's the flip side of it is, you know, these people who are responsible for the migrations to the clouds, for these digital transformations, for securing the cloud infrastructure, they're all working from home, which may or may not be terrible because they weren't actually working in an Amazon or Google or Microsoft data center anyway, right? They were remote's remote. What are you seeing on this, and how do you think this plays out over the next 6 months, 12 months and beyond?
Well, sure. And I think that what we're seeing, and if I put my Securosis hat back on, right, you know, kind of really kind of taking a step back and looking at the trends here, especially relative to cloud, it's really going to accelerate a lot of the stuff that we were doing anyway, right? You know, folks that have big on-prem, you know, infrastructures are looking, going, how do I get somebody into my data center to fix things? How do I upgrade computers? How do I upgrade spindles? It just, especially for front office stuff that you could just as easily have SaaS, you know, in order to do these things, that again, it continues to become a no-brainer. So even some of those late majority type companies that have been holding on to their Exchange servers and their SharePoint servers and, you know, kind of whatever else it was, Lotus Notes, still have people using Lotus Notes out there.
Hey, Lotus Notes will always hold a dear place in my heart.
Too. I started, you know, God, in the early 90s, you know, kind of doing Lotus Notes implementation. So not to date myself, but I'm an old guy.
No, look, at Interliant, that was our main business. We were a large Lotus Notes hoster. No cloud, no ubiquitous bandwidth, but we were selling hosted Lotus Notes.
You were there.
Anyway,
SaaS continues to accelerate. You have the same issue with infrastructure as a service, so you're going to start seeing a lot more of those migrations build momentum. You know, it's interesting. I think you're going to see things like Gartner calls it SASE, right? It's basically, you know, kind of networking as a service or secure networking as a service. Those services are going to, you know, really take off. And again, probably not right now, because a lot of the organizations that have their existing VPN infrastructure, they don't have time or didn't have time over the last month to really build that out. So they go to their gateway provider, their checkpoints, their Fortinets, their Palo Altos, and said, send me a crap ton of boxes, man. I got to support, you know, I've got to grow this thing out by a scale of 5, right? By an order of 5 over the next 2 weeks, right? So they don't have time to really re-architect that. But once we come out of this thing, I think you're going to see just really an acceleration of this zero infrastructure concept, where if I'm a company, I don't want to have anything besides a bunch of laptops. And by the way, those laptops are dumb. You know, they're just connecting to stuff out there in the environment. And to your point about remote development and DevOps, and again, what you've seen are a bunch of new companies that have been in place that do this anyway because they can't get the talent in one place, right? So you're building company operational motions. You're building product development motions, product deployment, product operations motions with this concept in mind. But as opposed to the, really early leaders, the 5% of folks that have really adopted that kind of mind frame, we're going to see, I think within the next 18 months, 20 to 25% of folks going, I'm blowing up how I'm doing things, right? And then, over a 3 to 4 year period, it's going to be everybody else. Because if there's one thing we're good at, right? Big breaches, huge issues, we try not to make the same mistake again. So we will, even if it's less of a risk, right? We will spend all sorts of resources to make sure we don't make that same mistake again. Although Lord knows the odds that we'll get hit by a similar type of novel pandemic, type of thing are nil, but we'll still make sure that we're, not going to get hit by that.
I don't know if they're nil, to tell you the truth, but
I guess I'm an optimist by nature.
Yeah, you are. But here's the thing. I'm going to put forth the proposition to you and to our audience that the very idea of using a VPN when 90% of the apps most people are using are SaaS-based up in the cloud is ridiculous. Why would you go back to some phony, it's like going to visit, you ever go visit the castles in England and Scotland, that are set up as tourist traps now? That's what it's like. You're going back to an empty castle to get back out to the cloud, right? There's got to be a more direct, better way here than I think what we're seeing with this work from home spree with COVID and coronavirus is the dying gasp of the VPNs.
Oh, I think you're onto something there. But the problem is we don't have the same level of control with our CASBs into all these different SaaS things, right? Which is why I think some of those SASE networks, so you're on the VPN, but the VPN is coming to you. Right, so you're not home running back to the environment. You're getting on the network. You know where you're allowed to go. You can monitor and actually inspect the traffic that's going to these SaaS organizations. You can either through integrating with the SaaS provider or at the network level start to understand and start doing some level of content analysis. So you've got a combination of SASE plus, much deeper SaaS-based security or security for SaaS, right? You have a couple of companies that are out doing that. It's one of the things I'll be working on over the next, month or two, probably before the end of Q2, is this idea of the data security lifecycle in a SaaS world, right? Rich, right? It wasn't me. It was like Rich and Adrian came out with this data security lifecycle back in 2008, right? 2009, which was really a complicated structure to help you understand your entitlements and classifying data and making sure that you've got, kind of the ability to manage the data throughout its life cycle from origination through actual destruction. Well, how does that look in a SaaS world? So I'm doing some research right now about that because, again, that's a very timely issue. We're going to see a dramatic acceleration of the companies that have been, dawdling their feet, right, kind of in order to get there, and how we're going to maintain the sanctity and the integrity of that data is absolutely a critical thing.
I did an interview a couple days ago with a company called Better Cloud, I think their name is. Whatever. They've been around a while, as it turns out. But they have a term they're pushing called SaaSops.
Yep.
Right? That's exactly what you're talking about.
That's right. There are a handful of companies that go, very deep into the SaaS, kind of application to provide, data protection, but also access, right? Who has access?
Right. It's not just security. It's almost like the old IT guy, right, who was running the AD server and all of that stuff, and the Exchange server and all that other on-prem crap. Now has to deal with. He still has to manage that same functionality, and it's security, and it's network access control, and it's the network itself, and it's what used to be a firewall, and they call it SaaSops. I like that better than SASE. SASE sounds, I don't.
Key side of that, right? SaaSops is.
But I think that's part of it.
So SASE plus SaaSops. And I get very confused with that kind of thing because
SASE plus SASE. Okay, I'm going to leave that one to you, Mike. Mike, how, a lot of people are saying, wow, May 1st is going to come along and everything's going to go back to the way it was. I'm just going to click my heels 3 times and say there's no place like RSA. There's no place like RSA.
To me, there's no place like Black Hat. We would love to be at Black
Well,
Hat.
but that's
to teach our
August.
cloud
Let's hope by
security.
Black Hat. Yeah. I mean, so let's take that. That's usually first week in August.
I think it's a low likelihood event. I mean, I do think that there are some states, and again, we're a tech show, so we're not going to, kind of go all, kind of whether it's Fox or MSNBC on either side of the polls here. But I do believe that there are some states that will relax their guidance, right, about social distancing. So I personally think that's a huge mistake, right? Because until we have, kind of testing and the analogy we were talking about before, right, about this idea that, kind of if you don't know who's sick, are you safe to be in an environment like that? You can make a similar analogy into your cloud security ops, right? If you don't know what's misconfigured, scaling something up, you're just doing something, a lot faster. Right. So you have this idea that you have to have an underlying perspective of data, right? You have to have the data to understand what your exposures are, what your vulnerabilities are. And it's clear, what are we, the 13th today? We're 2.5 weeks from the end of April. We are not going to have the data that we need in order for me to feel okay going to a public place, having my kids go to a public place. And so that's just me going to a restaurant, right? Or
Yeah, no, let alone to a conference with 5,000 or 10,000 people.
You have real liability issue, right? The conference organizers, kind of the hotels, and I mean, they're going to sue the crap out of those guys if somebody comes and it starts to expand like that. So I'm skeptical that we're going to see sports this year, right? I don't think any.
Please don't cancel football.
I'm sad, man. I'm sad, right? That's the one
just
passion.
when the
That's
Patriots
the thing that
are
I
going
just
to
love
suck.
to do.
I had a payback coming to a lot of New England fans coming this year, man.
I know.
But here's my take on it, Mike. I got into it on one of the social media platforms with a friend of ours.
Confrontation on social media.
Never.
No. Right.
Look, I don't think some president, whether you like him or not, or even some governor, whether you like them or not, the fact that they say we're open for business is not going to be, Mike, you love yourself and your kids too much to put them in danger. And you don't give a flying rat's behind what some governor or some president or someone else says. If you don't have confidence that it's safe to put your loved ones out there, you're not going to do it. And I think when you look at a Black Hat, and I don't mean black, any big conference where you are densely in there with thousands of people, you've got to have unbelievable testing, antibody testing, and all of these other things before I'm going to go start meeting with people. I mean,
so we start talking about that, right? And you start to see the importance of remote training and some of these other mechanisms, your virtual conferences, which I know you do a lot of at DevOps.com and Security Boulevard, right? The ability to engage and interact and learn, because at the end of the day, business doesn't stop, right? Maybe it's moving a little bit slower, so it's but it's not like we're sending a letter, across that has to sail across the Atlantic to, understand what's going on in Europe. So things are slowed down a little bit, but they're not stopped. So we're going to find new motions for that. In fact, Rich and I are in the process of, I wouldn't say converting, but finding platforms to be able to deliver our cloud security training online, right, in a remote context, so that we can interact with the students, so that we can help them troubleshoot the labs that we go through, but we can make the content and the lectures, more, chunk them down a little bit more, but make them, more compelling, because again, that's one of the
people can go, because one of the things you'll find in virtual, right, people may not have 4 hours to sit on this, but they can do an hour a day we'll talk offline, Mike. From my DevOps Institute experience, I could probably help you with that. But yeah, that's exactly what I think we're going to see more of. And look, it's not just you and Rich's security training, frankly, though it's an excellent adventure, like Ted and the other guy, but schools, my kids are doing, all of a sudden their schools had to turn on a dime to start doing online, right? And they're having,
challenges,
growing lessons and challenges that I think they'll overcome. I don't know what kind of education my kid's going from. So happy I paid for this private school. But yeah, I mean, these are, again, real world lessons. But you know what? I think we'll come out stronger on the other side of it, having experienced it.
So the thing I say, and I'm sure you've heard me say this 1,000 times, right? Darwin was not wrong. So, at the end of the day, the folks that adapt are going to prosper in this new world, whatever that looks like, right? The folks that don't are going to be sitting there, ruining for the day, make conferences great again, right? Make network security great again, right? Make on-prem email great again, right? Kind of all of
make Lotus Notes better, great again.
Make Lotus Notes great again. Honestly, we could do hashtags all day on that. But the point is, now is not the time for nostalgia. Right? The world has changed. And if you can't see that, or if you don't want to accept that, or you want to grasp to, sitting in your office or cube with, your couple dozen buddies sitting, kind of in close proximity to you, you're going to have a problem, right? Because we're not going back there. You look at it from a CFO standpoint and goes, help me understand why I need these, huge cube farms of folks when folks may not have been as productive, but one, they're not spending an hour a day commuting, right? Or even longer,
more.
Right? They're much, once you adapt to it, you're happier because you have a lot more flexibility and we can maintain a certain level of productivity, right? And it's not going to be for everybody, right? But a lot of organizations are going to go in that direction, and that's going to impact everything from work-life balance to the systems that you use to the expectations that your organizations have for how you're working. I mean, yes, this is a point in time that, hopefully we'll get this thing under control and get a lot of testing and get a vaccine, hopefully within a year to 18 months. And leave that in the rear view. But this is accelerated and will continue to accelerate so many different trends that we were already seeing.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Mike, we are way over time. I'm just looking up here. This was the shortest 20 minutes I ever did. But anyway, man, we're going to have you come back on. Maybe, so we have your webinar on Thursday, tomorrow.
That's right.
And that'll also be available on demand for anyone who's watching this on demand and may have missed the webinar. The URL will still work. You'll be able to go watch the on-demand version of the webinar. Other than that, man, thank you so much. Listening to you talk and watching the time go by, I'm transported back to 2005, 2006. I don't think there's Securosis yet. It's Mike at Security Insight. What was the book? You wrote?
The Pragmatic
CISO.
Yeah.
And doing podcasts, no video, just audio, and talking security for an hour like this kind. Passionate, love it, man. All right. Hey, Mike Rothman, thanks for being here, man. TechStrong.
Whenever you want me.
I hear you. Mike Rothman, Disrupt Ops, Securosis, and just all around security maven. Hey, man, good luck. Stay well. Stay strong.
You too, my friend. You too.
All right. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right. Back here in the studio. Hope you enjoyed the Mike Rothman interview. Our next segment features a gentleman who I first saw speak. It was probably at one of the DevOps Connect Jenkins days. We did maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And I was really taken back with, I mean, he just really got security, really sharp, great speaker as well. And that's Matt Rose over at Checkmarx. Of course, Checkmarx over the last 3-4 years, if you're not familiar, have become a real powerhouse in AppSec and testing. And Matt does a great job there. He's one of their principal evangelists. So here's my interview with Matt Rose from Checkmarx.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, TechStrong TV. Thanks for joining us on this segment. Our guest this segment is a gentleman I've had the pleasure of interviewing over the years, I don't know, a half a dozen or more times, maybe more. He's spoken at many of our conferences, and now, of course, he's joining us from home. It's Matt Rose from Checkmarx. Hey, Matthew, how are you?
Good. How you doing, Alan?
I'm good. How are you making out during these unusual times?
It's an adjustment. More, I've been working virtual for pretty much a whole career, but the big thing is having 2 teenage daughters doing homeschool on top of me, where that's more of the challenge than anything else.
I have a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old boy home now, and you can't imagine how much they can eat. I mean, I can't keep the Instacarts coming fast enough for frozen pizzas, French fries, hot dogs, hamburgers, nothing good. But yeah, it's an adjustment. I don't mind coming to the office to film these, just to get out of things. The other thing, Matt, is I got to tell you the truth. I've also worked remotely for many, many years in my life, though we have the office here for media ops. But I always travel. I've been traveling for 20 plus years, Matt. I haven't been home. Same thing with you, right? I think my wife's about ready for me to get back on a plane, hell or high water. So it is what it is. Anyway, Matt, thanks for joining us today. I know Checkmarx just made an announcement trying to help developers and DevOps teams and security folks during these trying, unusual times. Why don't you give us a little background?
Sure. So Checkmarx, we have a application security platform, and one of the products is called code bashing. It's a kind of a next-gen version of developer training. It's not like long CBT classes that take hours that are click-throughs and people hate. It's more gamification of developer training, and it's designed to be short bursts of information to really help you solve a here-and-now problem. I'll give you an example. Like if you want to learn holistically what SQL injection is or cross-site scripting, we have modules in different languages that you can basically bring it up and not only see like what the coding examples are, but what the interaction for the end user would be. So what we're doing is we're actually letting organizations use the code bashing platform for free for 45 days to really help with this remote workforce that we're having, and people have more cycles. Like me and you, we're not traveling, so people aren't running to meetings, and they actually have found more time in their day. So we think it will be very beneficial to a lot of developers out there to maybe bone up on their application security training and different aspects. And one of the cool thing about code bashing is that it's gamification, so you can still keep that interactive type of competition going between the development teams to say, hey, I finished these modules and I got these rankings or these grades, and compare and contrast to your teammates. So we feel that it's a good fit for the remote workforce, and we wanted to give this away to, there's certain kind of requirements to join up. Just on number of developers, it's up to 100 users. We're not giving it away for thousands of users, but up to 100 users within an organization, you can use it to, have a training effort for your development staff.
That's excellent. Excellent. And Matt, first of all, kudos to Checkmarx and the team there for doing this. I think here's the good news. I was talking to Mitchell Ashley earlier for a segment we're doing. If there's a silver lining in all of this, is that we are seeing, not all organizations, but many organizations try to figure out what could they give, right? You guys, you're not growing food, you're not doing medical research, but how can we help the people who are doing medical research or who are frontline, or the people who are working from home? And we need to keep the wheels turning around here, right? And so how can you help? And with the code bashing release, I actually wrote a blog too to try and help
we're throwing a lot of non-technical people into using very technical platforms, WebEx, Zoom, all these different, web meetings, not just the professionals or the business people, but kids. So kids are now using a lot of this stuff. So I wrote a blog about how to be safe and how to verify what you're doing in terms of updating software, downloading links, because it is completely open and people are not familiar with the security protections of potential ransomware attacks or phishing attacks. My school said I was supposed to download this, and somebody finds out the school is, sending things out through email or through side channels. There's a risk. So I actually, on top of the product with Checkmarks, I wrote some blogs to try and help people stay safe as they do virtual work and virtual school.
Matt, I'm going to tell you something. So I don't disagree with you, but I'm going to take a slightly different tact and ask you what you think about it. Kids are a lot more net native savvy, right? And they also have a reduced expectation of privacy. And so at some level, they make out okay. You want to talk really bad. We did a virtual Seder at my at our house with a bunch of our relatives, my wife's and our relatives. Try getting 60-something, 70-something year old people, right? There's a whole new 4 questions for the Seder, right? How do I turn on my audio? How do I, and these people are, they're like sheep's being led to slaughter in terms of being susceptible to phishing and ransomware and other kind of, COVID-related scams that we're seeing. And they, even more so than I think kids are.
Yeah, and even taking it one step further, there's a question of data at rest, data in transit, where, okay, now people are downloading sensitive documents to their, local machine that's not a company machine or something like that, and they're on a Wi-Fi network that's not secure properly. So there's all sorts of new risks. And we're just trying to do a small thing at Checkmarks to try and help with, training developers. But there's a big problem, and a lot of organizations are addressing it in different ways.
Yeah, we did one interview segment, I might have been last week or earlier this week, Matt, where, this whole thing called SaaSops, where these IT teams are now confronted with, because it was a different world, Matt, maybe 15, 20 years ago, when everyone kind of VPN'd back into the office and the apps you accessed were down in the server closet or a data center, on-prem, and all good, right? That IT team can lock it down. Now, no one does that. Everyone's getting SaaS-based apps from the cloud. They're not necessarily, tethered back to the mothership. They're going direct to the app. And how do you manage and administer a remote workforce doing this? So SaaSops is the word. I think the company was Better Cloud was the name of the company that came up with this. But I think this is a real problem we're going to see. Security people are security people. DevOps developers are DevOps developer people. The IT folks who have to keep, the lines open and the stuff moving. This is a real problem for them, man.
Well, think about this too. The reliance we all have on the e-commerce platforms, the services platforms. You mentioned Instacart or Grubhub or all these. Those are all software, and they're being tapped to a new level of usage. That's why Checkmarks wanted to release the try and help to make sure that all the companies out there are properly training, because now they're actually being used more and more from Amazon and online shopping to the Instacart and Grubhub and Uber Eats and all these other things that are delivering food. We want to make sure that those applications are secure. And that's why we're trying to, we're not a doctor or, we're not a medical professional, but we can actually help with the security associated with the services that people are relying on to exist pretty much these days.
Absolutely. And you want to talk about contingency planning, capacity planning, continuity planning. All of these disciplines are now, being tested, textbook kind of cases are tested here. Matt, let's get away from the instant for a moment and try to look a little bit further down the road. What do you think some of the longer term lasting results will be of this whole thing?
I think that, the people that always had the flexible work from home type policies where it's like you need to be in the office a few days a week or things like that, we're really showing that we can still exist using virtual meetings, virtual platforms for, what we're doing right now for interviews, for, Zoom calls for multiple people in different places. So I think there's going to be a new comfort level with this virtual communication because people were unsure of it. They, do we do that? I'd rather be face to face. But I think people are starting to find their niche. They're finding their groove with using this stuff. So as we move on, I think that, the comfort level with virtual platforms for communication and meetings is going to be more and more. And we have to really think about what that means from a security risk standpoint with all the data that's now being put, as you said, in the cloud or, in transit and all these type of things. So I think that it's really kind of ripping the Band-Aid off with the virtual communication platforms and the comfort level associated with them.
Yeah. Matt, what about this though? So you work from home. Many of us I know, see in tech, I think work from home is probably a little bit more prevalent than it may be in some other industries. But do you think we'll see a return to offices?
I think it'll be a slow return to offices. I don't, who knows? We're all just watching the news and seeing what the next step is. But I think offices always exist because there is an important aspect of human interaction. I know we're separating and social distancing now, but I think people, sitting in a room can hash things out a lot more effectively in certain situations than they can through a virtual platform. There's not as many distractions, but time will tell. We'll see what happens with the process. As you are, I'm comfortable working from home. I've been doing it a long time, but it's an adjustment for a lot of people that are used to waking up and driving to work and going to an office and having that interaction. But just think about during the day, how much time is wasted walking from meeting to meeting in a big office building or, stopping to have a conversation about, current events or things like that. I think that the day can be compressed using the virtual aspects. Instead of being 8 hours, you can get the same amount done in 5 hours, just because there's that churn of the day from moving from one place to another, or just conversations that aren't productive.
So I'll play devil's advocate. 2 points I want to make on that.
Okay.
One. I think the office cooler talk, as you're talking about, you know what I mean? Gathering around the office cooler and just shooting the breeze. I think that is it's bigger than we give it credit for in terms of defining a corporate culture and building relationships within the company.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done both, right? The last company I did before MediaOps, I co-founded a company in Boulder, Colorado, while living in Florida, and I did the back and forth thing, bi-coastal thing for a while. But so I've seen it both ways. I do think the camaraderie that is built up from working in an office place is something to be said. Secondly, while I agree with you, cutting all the BS out, getting down to the nitty gritty, we could cut that 8-hour workday down to 5 or 6. I don't think that's the way it works for many people, especially for people who've never worked from home before. They don't know where the on-off switch is.
Well, I always say that I call working from home a separation of church and state.
Yeah,
it's like,
it is.
Your office is your home is your office. So when do you turn it off? It's like, okay, I'm look down, it's 10 o'clock at night and I'm still doing things. I never
still
had
doing
that,
my email and working, right? Because what difference does it make? I don't have that night-day thing. Actually, I saw a report a couple weeks back, and I don't know if it still holds true, but that with the people moving to working from home, people are averaging 3 hours more a day of work. And that takes the commute and everything out of it. That's crazy when you think about it, right? So it'll be interesting to see how this comes along. The other thing, though, Matt, is I'd love to get your opinion on, and that is, one thing about the cyber criminals, they never waste an opportunity.
No,
right?
Absolutely not.
And this has just been served up to them on a silver platter, and they are going hog wild, right? And there's a real,
Well, as you said, people using these platforms, you know, your Seder with, you know, older people that aren't familiar with technology, oh, I need to download this to attend the thing I need to attend, and it's an attachment and it's ransomware. I mean, and it's probably not that sophisticated in terms of its implementation. So we have to be, you know, they're taking these opportunities to kind of be jerks. You know, it's like people are relying on this, but they're taking it because it's you know, easy fishing.
One of the as I say always, it's one of the reasons we can't have nice things. You know, because there's always a jerk out there. Matt, beyond putting this product and service out for free, how else? I mean, what else are you hearing? You know, I mean, you're in your position at Checkmarx. You're a bit of a canary in the coal mine in that you talk to a lot of people. You're out here talking to customers. What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Business is still moving forward, and it's kind of interesting that, you know, as you said, you're probably working, you know, as maybe working more and more hours, people are more accessible. So instead of, you know, moving from meeting to meeting and all that, our customers, we're having a great interaction with our customers because they seem to be more available. And maybe that thing that was bothering them that they needed, you know, help with or some additional training on, now they have the time to do it. So we're actually working to make our customers much more successful based on, you know, kind of the more time they have to focus on specific issues. You know, and probably just like your personal life too. How many projects have you done around your house that, you know, have been sitting there for a long time? You're like, well, I'm going to get on that. I'm going to paint that room, or I'm going to cut those bushes, just because you're like, I have time to do it now.
You know what? I pulled out the chainsaw this weekend and trimmed up some trees.
I'm counting all your fingers. I think you still have them all. Okay,
no. You know, I posed for a picture. Say hello to my little friend. But yeah, I cut them up very neatly. The trash man took them away. I started playing the guitar again after about 15 years. That is true. All of a sudden there's time for things. And you know what? Again, maybe that's part of that silver lining. Maybe it's not a bad thing to learn or to remember that there's time for things.
Sometimes make lemonade out of lemons. I mean, we're all in this together, and we're all working to, you know, keep economy moving, companies moving, social aspects moving, and, you know, it was a little bit of a, you know, chicken with his head cut off running around in first, but I think we've kind of found our process, found the way that this needs to work. For the time being. I mean, it's not going to be like this forever, hopefully. I mean, you know, there's hopefully a light at the end of the tunnel very soon. Yeah. But I think people are still being productive. I mean, I know, you know, all aspects of business are still moving forward, you know, mostly. I mean, not as much as the social interaction or the personal interaction, but we're still getting things done.
I agree with you 100%, Matt. And I need football season to happen. So
I need any season, you know, competitive, you know, tiddlywinks or something, you know, some sport to watch.
Yeah, I know. You know what? I told you my two teenage sons. Well, one's 20. I guess he's not a teenager anymore. But my 20 and 18-year-olds are home, and you know, they're just watching replays of old football games, old basketball games, old baseball games. They need some fresh action. So. Yeah, it would make being isolated at home or at least it would make my life, parenting them, a heck of a lot easier if we had some of that home as well. Anyway, hey Matt, first of all, thank you and Checkmarx for making this available, Codebash, and you know, I hope people out. Actually, we didn't even mention if people want to go download this, use it. How can they do it?
Yeah, just go to our website and you'll see information about the program itself, and download. You fill out a little bit of information and you can get going. I don't have a link to share with everybody, and if
but if we could send them just to checkmarx.com, and that's CHECKMARX.com.
That's correct, checkmarx.com.
And they can go from there. So Matt, thanks to Checkmarx for making this available. Thanks for being on our show today, and you know what, I hope I see you real soon out in person on the conference circuit like normal, and we're all healthy and well coming out of this.
Well, it's interesting to you say, you know, we've done a lot of interviews and you keep having me back, so it must be good content for you. You haven't told me, no, I don't want that guy anymore.
No, we haven't said that once, but it's always a pleasure, my friend. All right, hey Matt, good luck, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, Alan. Be safe.
All right. Matthew Rose from Checkmarks here on TechStrong TV. We'll be right back in a second with our next segment.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Hi, everyone. All right, back here in the studio. Hope you enjoyed that interview with Matt Rose. You know, it's interesting. One of the nice things about what's going on in all these Zoom interviews from people who are working from home is you get a little insight into their house where they work, especially those who are working, long-term from home. They have their home office set up. Interesting stuff. Anyway, I wanted to next go to our news segment, if it's okay. We've got a couple of interesting articles, as usual, more than a few, on our site, Security Boulevard, DevOps.com, and Container Journal. Before I jump into them, though, just two quick reminders. Number one, there's a commercial on today's show about TechStrong Con. It's our first commercial we're running on that. Please go check out TechStrongCon.com. It's a great conference, virtual event we're putting on June 4th. Great lineup of speakers. John Willis handpicked these folks. And it's going to be a great event, so do check that out. Number two, I mentioned it in yesterday's show. If you get a chance, take a look at the Adventures of Microservice, that serial that Bob Resselman has up on Security Boulevard and over on Container Journal. It's a comic book series, superhero comic book series. And I mean, the graphics are amazing. The story's amazing. Bob's really outdone himself. So please go check that out. Okay. Up on Security Boulevard, there's 50, 60 articles today, just like every day. Two that I wanted to bring out to you is one is a cyber attorney, Mark Rash. Mark's a regular contributor. And he wrote an article about the president signing two broadband bills that were passed by Congress, obviously. And, though we're in net, they kind of did away with net neutrality and so forth. There's still some regulations around broadband, and whether you support the bills or not, I'm not savvy enough to tell you, but go read the article from Mark and stay up to date on what's happening there. Next is security considerations for a blended workforce. Especially with all of us working from home, we find ourselves working in heterogeneous environments where we have maybe independent contractors, third parties, employees, just a mix of people, and we're all accessing the same SaaS applications and infrastructure and not in a central location. And this is a real challenge for our security teams and IT teams who are tasked with security out there. It's a great article on some considerations when you're dealing with this kind of blended workforce. Moving over to Container Journal, we have our friends at NewVector have added a tool for exploring container security and compliance risk. We're just seeing a tremendous amount of news coming out around container security. It's incredibly hot, and it's not unexpected, right? Because security seems to be a trailing indicator or a trailing metric of technology innovation. Right. First, the technology innovation comes, people start adopting, and then, unfortunately, then they start thinking, what are we going to do about security? And we're really starting to see security catch up to this now and get out ahead of it, with many companies coming out with container or containerized security. security for containers solutions. New Vector's been out there, and they have some new stuff out. Check that out. And then a good article about how container technologies themselves, Kubernetes, Docker, etc., service meshes, are transforming programming languages. And for my developer friends out there, go read that article. I think, you know what, it's good to stay abreast of these kinds of trends. Next, let me turn over to DevOps. Really two good articles today on DevOps. One is for my friend Anders Wahlgren over at CloudBees. You know, Anders has been tasked with rolling out and developing the SDM, Software Delivery Management, tools, program, platform for CloudBees. And this is more real now than it's ever been. And CloudBees is going live with it. And, you know, Anders has wrote what I think is sort of the linchpin of this whole why you want to, you know, how you got to think about software delivery management and why it does demand a new mindset. It's a great article by Anders, and I really, really encourage you to go check that one out on DevOps.com. And then lastly, another good article from our friend Brendan Hayes over at Broadcom. Is it time to end the software metric madness? And, you know, this comes out of a Forrester report that CEOs have gotten so hung up on arcane software metrics, you know, in terms of deliveries and so forth, delivery cycles and frequency, that we don't pay attention to some of the important things that we need to pay attention to, like, is it really working? And are our customers really happy? And is it contributing to the bottom line? So, good article by Brendan there. I'd go check it out. Guys, I wanted to be quick about it. 6 really good articles to go check out, 2 on each of our sites. There's a lot more out there, though, so please check it out. Feel free. And then, you know, join our Slack channel. Tell us what you think. Give us some feedback. We have people on there. It'd be great to really get that communication kicking along. Next, I wanted to move things along here by turning things over to our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon. Charlene has 2 great interviews today. The first is with John Meritic from the Open Mainframe Project, part of the Linux Foundation, and it's around this whole, all of a sudden, COBOL's hot, right? If all of these unemployment systems that the states use and so forth are all mainframe COBOL projects, and we need COBOL programmers. So Charlene talks to John Meritic about that, and we'll let Charlene take it away. Over to you, Charlene.
Thanks, Alan. Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, Media Ops Managing Editor, and I'm here now with John Meritic, who is Director of the Open Mainframe Project with the Linux Foundation. John, thank you so much for taking a few minutes and talking with me today.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite. Glad to be chatting.
Excellent. Well, you are a good person for me to talk to regarding the situation happening in the state of New Jersey, which has called for any and all COBOL programmers to help them out in processing the amazingly numerous amounts of jobless claims and unemployment benefits that the state has just been inundated with since this COVID crisis has started. So let's talk about that, because I mean, it really just amazes me. I think, you know, it's like, it kind of shows you that everything old is new again, and really old developers don't die. They just kind of wait in the wings until they're needed again. So yeah. What's your take on it?
Well, you know, it's an interesting topic to even have came up, you know, just considering the pandemic and crisis that we're in, and, you know, the weight of all of this. You would think COBOL programmers would be the last thing on somebody's mind, but mainframes and a lot of this infrastructure, it's critical to our world. And it's been always infrastructure that's been there, but we just don't often see because it just keeps moving and working along. You know, back when we used to fly in airplanes, that was all thanks to mainframes. The times when we're all trying to buy toilet paper as quick as we can online or places like that, that's all thanks to mainframes. That's how that credit card processing work. It's such a huge piece of our society, and really how our global economy really works and keeps functioning. And, a lot of these systems, they were written, 10, 20, 30, maybe even more years ago. And over time, just like any system, depending upon how it's maintained, how it's pulled together, all of that, you run into various states with it. And, with the crisis we've that is really hitting our society right now, it's an interesting thing that probably, even if these systems were 10 years old or 5 years old or written a month ago, we may not have been able to even foresee this happening.
Right.
But here we are, record, absolute, not just like marginally record unemployment claims, wildly record. And I think we're seeing a lot of those calls out there, and we're seeing it in all of our areas of our industry. And I think certainly, COBOL tends to be a big one of them.
So we've been talking quite a bit lately, I would say over the last year or two on DevOps.com about the increasing number of companies that are actually mainframe companies that are actually doing DevOps on the mainframe. And their argument is that it's not just a COBOL language anymore, that you can do many different languages on the mainframe. Why is it that you think that maybe COBOL still exists as a language on the mainframe when there are so many other languages that can be used on the mainframe, and that might actually be more helpful when we're talking about a shrinking workforce that actually knows the COBOL language?
Well, there's two interesting things to that. I think one of, on the language front, many of these applications were written so long ago and they work. And, when you put the investment, and especially if things are very mission critical, which is really what the mainframe's known for, refactoring them constantly, changing to whatever the popular language of the day, all of these things, that's not necessarily a feasible thing to do. And maybe just not even just a good idea for business continuity's sake. So, you have to be able to consider how these applications work and continue to function, because, that's really what the mainframe has been known for. And a lot of these applications were oftentimes written to take advantage of those feature functionality of high transactional processing and whatnot. Now, the interesting point is you mentioned about the dwindling workforce. And the thing that sort of struck me a little bit is that seems to be a very commonplace argument. Part of the announcement we did late last week was pulling together a calling all COBOL or programmers forum to just to see, hey, you folks out there, help is needed. Who can, not just volunteer work, but even, for-profit work. If people are just looking for jobs or looking to, have contracting work. As I'm looking at this right now, as we're on the phone here, there's over 700 individuals that have raised their hand and saying, we have interest, like we are available, we want to help, right?
That's great.
So, you could make the argument that maybe it's a little bit dwindling, but it's still alive and kicking. And I think we run into that with any technology area. It may not sort of be at the hot level of our list, but in the areas that it's being used, it's the language, it's the tooling you use. So I think that's another thing you started to take into consideration with this whole picture.
That's really interesting that you have such a large number of folks who have answered the call already. Are you guys doing anything else to kind of help those who maybe are interested but really might not know the COBOL language too much? Are you guys doing any training or anything like that?
So we have two pieces that we also announced at the same time. One is pulling together a technical expertise forum, so people can share tips, tricks, practices, in sort of a consolidated area. And then the second is we brought in a new open source project, which is actually training materials for getting up and going on COBOL at sort of that very introductory level. It was contributed to the project by IBM. But it's actually available now up on GitHub. People have found it already, and I think there's about 300 stars and 200 people watching. And we even have a couple pull requests that have already came in for it.
Wow.
So we're trying to get that material out there because, this is the stuff that helps sort of power our society. And there's a wide interest in being able to have materials available, and we're looking to answer that call.
Excellent, excellent. So, the people who are answering the call so far, what who are they? Are they older programmers who are kind of maybe coming out of retirement? Are they younger people who are looking to maybe add to their expertise, or is it a mix, or what are you seeing?
Yes, it's everything. I mean, I'm just looking here in the background. I have 35 years as a senior programmer. Right next to it is 10 years. One next to it is COBOL beginner. It's really all over the place. It's all sorts of different, and geographically it's spread too. I saw a couple of people, I'm local to the Cleveland, Ohio area. There's Cleveland, Ohio people applying. There's people from India. There's people from South America. There's people from Asia, Europe, all over the place. It is broad across, diverse locations, diverse backgrounds, diverse genders, diverse ages. It's all over the place.
So do you think that maybe this is kind of the tip of the iceberg when we're talking about the need for COBOL programmers? Once again, as maybe more state or local government agencies start to get taxed because of, not just because of this pandemic per se, but maybe just as we kind of move forward and try to get back to a new normal.
I think the one thing that is actually been a little bit even surprising to me, and I feel reasonably connected within the mainframe community, is that this talent exists out there. There are people that are capable, willing, ready to jump in there and start working on it. So when we hear the commentary that we can't find COBOL talent, in 72 hours I found 700 names, and so it's there.
Right.
And so I think that's something that we just really need to put into context a little bit more appropriately. So I think that's going to be just, to me, I think that's the biggest takeaway. I'm sure you will always hear the arguments on, modernizations of systems and whatnot. And I think there's some degree that we're always going to have that. We have another project called Zoe, which really focuses on, connecting some of these legacy mainframe systems, more broadly within the enterprise through some more modern programming techniques and whatnot. So I think we're always going to see sort of a mix of all of these things. That said, these technologies are going to be useful. I mean, I come from a software development background, and the one thing that I always know about programming languages is they're always written to solve a problem. They're written with a problem in mind that they're trying to go after, and they're often very tailored to that. COBOL's no different. C's no different. Ruby's no different. Rust is no different. Keep going with the language du jour, language to past.
Right.
It's all there, and there's all of this stuff that's written out there because it's the best tool for the job. And often case this is here. So I think that's something we really need to keep in mind.
Well, that's great. So if folks are interested and they want to see how they might be able to help out, what do they need to do?
So we have a forum topic up on our community forums, community.openmainframeproject.org. It's calling all COBOL programmers. It's really easy. All you have to do is just a couple of little questions. You put in a post, name, location, background, things like that, and you can be out there right away. If you already have some talent and maybe you're in the market, but you're wanting to help connect with people that are asking questions, we also have a forum up there where people are asking technical questions, and it's all over the place, even for things like IDEs to use and things like that. So there's great questions there. And as our technical materials that are being contributed from IBM into this new open source project, I'd really encourage people to check them out, provide pull requests of changes, updates. Some of it is tailored towards, some of the VS Code editing work. So help contribute there to make it more applicable to more diverse editors and things like that. I would say start in those three locations.
All right, great. Well, John, thanks for taking a couple minutes and talking with me about this. I think it's a great endeavor you guys are doing, and hopefully it'll help the state of New Jersey and other departments and state organizations as I'm sure they're going to be strapped as well. So thanks again, appreciate it.
No problem, thank you.
All right, guys, stay tuned for more TechStrong TV. We'll be right back.
Hey, nice interview there by Charlene with John Merdick. And it's funny, what's old is new. COBOL is COBOL is in demand right now. We see it on DevOps.com. One of the articles that our friend Bob Resselman wrote, The Beauty of the COBOL Language, is trending again on Google. So no doubt about that. Next up, we have another interview from Charlene, though, and this is with our friends Derek Weeks, DJ Charlene from Sonatype. Shout out, of course, to Mark Miller at Sonatype. And, you know, the Sonatypes folks just released the results of their community survey on DevSecOps. And I believe tomorrow, on the 17th, is their spring break of edition of All Day DevOps. So give that a check out. But for now, here, Charlene, take it away.
Thanks, Alan. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, back here on TechStrong TV, and I have the pleasure now of speaking with Derek Weeks and DJ Schleen of Sonatype, and they're here to talk about the latest community survey, DevSecOps community survey by Sonatype. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me.
Charlene, it's always good to see you. We
Good to see
usually
you.
see you in person at an event, but you know, online is nice as well.
It's always a second. I know. I much rather see people in person as well, but we do what we can in these troubled times. So, but it is great to see both of you, and I'm so excited to talk about this this latest DevSecOps community survey. That how many years have you guys been doing this now?
So this is the 7th year that we've put this report together. So it's a labor of love every year. But it's pretty cool because we get so many people from the community to participate. So we had over 5,000 people once again this year participate in the survey. And I think for DevSecOps, it's the longest running survey on the topic in the community. So it's nice to provide that voice out there to the community.
Well, that's great. And in 7 years, I imagine you guys have seen some real trends in, you know, just start to formulate over the years. So tell me a little bit about this year's survey. What are some of the things that really stood out to you?
Yeah, you know, I'll go first, and then I know DJ can share a lot as well. So that, you know, the big standout for this year, whereas a couple of years we've done this comparison in the survey of mature DevOps practices versus immature DevOps practices. What are the difference in practices, the investments, communications between the teams, et cetera? That's still in the report, but there's another set of attributes that we added this year around employee satisfaction. Are you happy with your job? Can you get the work done that's assigned to you? Would you recommend your employer? Do you have the tools necessary to get your work done? And we match that against some of the mature, immature attributes that we also look at in the survey for the participants. And the conclusion that we reached, and we can talk a little more about, is certainly that happier developers end up creating more secure code. And I think there's a strong correlation between a number of different attributes that we saw that point to that. So having happy employees on your team definitely makes a difference. DJ, you know, this is your first year with involved in analyzing the survey. You participated before, you've helped us formulate some of the questions in the past, but now that you've been in it, what were you seeing as kind of some of the standout items? Oh, we can't hear you. Or I can't hear you. Are you on mute?
Sorry about that.
That's
You're
all
on
right.
mute. Yeah.
The troubles with video conferencing, right?
Yeah.
You know, this has been a labor of love for the past 6 months or so for me, especially when Derek came and approached me about taking on driving the survey questions and digging into the data and that kind of thing. I had participated many times as a practitioner, and so this was a great opportunity to look at what kind of questions we'd asked in the past and adjust them and bring them forward in a way that we could get further information out. And the cultural questions that we put in there, you know, it turned out that as we started slicing and dicing the data, that cultural information about satisfaction just went through every single aspect of the survey. You know, choices of what tools people use, how mature their practices are, how much training they get. it was great to see data that sort of hit that cultural part of DevOps and DevSecOps that we always take for granted as being intangible.
Right.
There's part of running the survey every year that the fun part of it is we assemble 40 questions and we ask people, but we have no idea what's going to come back. So it's always figuring out like, well, what's the story that people are telling, and how do we then share that in the report? Because so it's fascinating. Like you can guess what the answers are going to be, but you really don't know until you see that raw data coming through and like, oh, this is what people were really thinking. So, or what people really do.
Yeah, and we had some joke questions. Like the one that comes to mind when you say that, Derek, is the friction question.
Yeah.
So we added this question. Hassan Yassar from CMU and I were going through the survey questions, and we thought, why don't we ask who is the biggest friction point on your team? Because we wanted to see who was pointing fingers at who. And it was supposed to be just a joke question, just to break things up, or just the seriousness of the questions. But it turned out when we started looking at that and correlating with other information, that told a story in itself, based on mature and immature organizations. So even the sort of off question or off topic questions really made an issue or difference in the data this year.
Yeah.
So who is the friction point then?
Man, if you're in an immature shop, this was like the eye-opening thing when we saw the results. Immature shops, the percentage of people that said managers and executives was something like 45% of the immature practices. And in mature practices, it was something like 15%. So it was almost 3x more in the immature shops, where they're like, management's a problem, communication's a problem. I don't know what's going on. I'm not getting as much information as I need, or they're slowing me down. But it was really interesting when you see that raw data. It's like, does a story pop out of this question or the answers to this? And that one was very apparent. Like, we have to tell this. Other things that I know popped out like that are, we asked people, how are you informed of security issues? And you see like the biggest answers, standard answers, and they were last year as well, were security tools tell you there are issues. The security team tells you there are issues. But one thing that was added this year, we added a couple more choices. One of them was rumor. And in immature organizations, 20% of the people said, we operate on rumor for alert of security issues. And in mature shops, it was like 4%. So it was really this, like, in mature shops, we're acting on empirical evidence of something going on. In immature shops, rumor like can reign. And when you see those things, it's like, wow, like things are different in that place versus that place.
That's real telling. So historically though, have you noticed changes, if you will, or just maybe a different mindset about DevSecOps over say that 7-year period of time? Has it become maybe more embraced by the the DevOps community in general? And have you seen more kind of happy developers, if you will, in the survey as opposed to maybe years past?
Yeah, DJ, do you have a perspective on this? I have one, but I'll let you take the lead if you want.
Well, to answer the first part of the question, we've seen things start maturing over the years, right? So we asked how mature people thought their organizations were, or if they were improving maturity, somewhat mature, not mature at all. And we've started seeing more of a shift into the maturing and, in improving maturity. So that's going to tell us that people are starting to really look into this more and really take it seriously. But the other sort of side of that was, we asked if people could have, or if security was still, I guess, was a priority, or people could spend time on security, developers, and it was consistent over the past 4 years. So 47% of people on
Yeah.
average for the past 4 years said that they still didn't have enough time to deal with security issues or to address security issues. So that sort of shows that we still aren't there.
Yeah.
So even though we're making progress, there's still some work to be done.
Yeah, and I think on that point, there's, while people don't have more time to spend on security, in the mature shops, more automated, integrated security is present. So we definitely see that. I think the big change for me that certainly come out, and we could kind of weave into I can read into various parts of the survey results that tell us this, but 5 years ago when people were just starting to throw out the term DevSecOps, and a lot of people were like, you can't use that term at all. Like there was this whole, religious war around the term itself. It was much more of, there's the DevOps tribe and there's the security tribe. And can these two different silos come together and work as a team? And I think that the big change that we've seen, the fundamental change that the survey points to, where our primary audience is developers and DevOps pros, architects, IT managers, and only about 6% security folks, is that there's more tooling being introduced by developers for security purposes. So if I integrate into my GitHub pull request to information about security, if I'm a developer and using that kind of tooling and integrating it in where I can get automated responses about security concerns, I don't necessarily need to bring in the security tribe. I'm actually doing that as the DevOps tribe without security, using security tools. And I think we've seen that in this year and certainly last year as well, that tooling is informing developers more of security issues, not just relying on the security people to tell them. And I think that's the biggest change that's happened, is tooling has matured to enable developers to do more without necessarily the friction of, can I merge this other organizational silo together, and how do we collaborate, which is sometimes very difficult to achieve, versus bringing in an open source tool that gives you security information that you integrate with your DevSecOps pipeline, sometimes pretty easy and pretty quick to do, and you can get some valuable results. So I think that's probably been the biggest transition I've seen in this space.
So do you think that that's been born out of necessity, though? Because we keep hearing about a lack of qualified security personnel. And now that, we're asking them to be more involved in the DevOps process or the development process, there's just not enough bodies out there to fill the void, if you will. So do you think that automation, security technologies are, that's the way we're going to move forward?
It's certainly part of it, because I've talked to, and I'm sure you've talked to many others with, I think of Mary Lee at Salesforce, who's like, I'm one AppSec person and there's 6,000 developers here, right? Yeah. Like, there's no way they're going to scale Mary's role to, hundreds or thousands of AppSec people. So automation is becoming part of that. But I also think there's this traditional bolt-on conversation of security that never worked, or security teams that came in saying, oh yeah, we have all the tooling in the world, let me plug in a 2-hour tax of analysis on your application into your pipeline that's trying to deliver every couple of minutes. That we knew didn't work years ago. And so I think the industry in itself, whether there were security vendors or just newcomers that said, I know there needs to be another way to do this, that people can't add this multi-hour tax of analysis on their applications and code into the pipeline. So what is a new way to do this? And I think that's some of what we see in the automated pull request analysis with things like GitHub or other tools, that vendors have integrated into GitHub to deliver that kind of information.
Excellent.
We also jumped into some questions on how many of each specific role, like security, development, operations, were at an enterprise, and how many folks were in those roles. And there's only so much you can put into a 50-page report, right? So there's a lot of other information that we could have gone down different roads. but some of it was fascinating, especially like looking at that 100 to 10 to 1 ratio. So like 100 devs, 10 ops, 1 security resource or person. It looked like there was more than that than we traditionally would have seen or would have expected.
Okay.
But when I dug into some of these things, and especially from security with regulated industries versus regulated industries, and the automation and the security resources they had, it turned out that people in regulated industries had less security resources but more automation, and so that sort of made the essence of a skeleton crew more scalable. And that's some experience I had on a personal level at different employers in the past, where we had limited resources, so we had to make the best of automation. So we can see that in those regulated industries right now.
Really, really fascinating stuff. So real quick before we close things out, were there any other kind of standouts in this year's survey that you guys wanted to highlight?
Yeah, one of my favorites to highlight, and this is, it's almost looked as an anti-pattern when you first see it, is we ask, have you had or experienced a breach, an open source related breach in the last 12 months? Overall in the survey, I think it was 23%, which is not a good rate. More than 1 in 5 had said yes, or we suspect a breach. In immature shops, it was 19%. And in the most mature DevOps practices, it was 28%. And so you'd think, wow, mature shops shouldn't be breached more than immature shops, and by a wide margin as well, almost 50% more. And so I went out to Twitter and I asked the Twitterverse and my friends in the community, like, hey, I've got a hunch as to why this is happening, but I'm interested in hunches from others. And there were 2 tribes that really came out in this conversation, a very active conversation. One was the AppSec tribe, and all of their responses generally tended toward development's moving way too fast. They will throw anything into production. They are not checking. They are just worried about velocity and time to market and all that, right? So that there was definitely that tribe. The DevOps tribe, though, the real DevOps, DevSecOps thought leaders out there were saying, of course it's higher. We know that we're being breached. We're actively looking at this. We're monitoring our environments. We know what's going on. Sharing information in our culture is rewarded, right? So it was all about the culture actually rewards us sharing information about what's going on. Those people in the immature shops don't know that they're being breached. We're actually reporting more of the truth. So that is a kind of standout issue, was definitely interesting to get perspectives on it. But remember, as I said before, 94% of the people taking our survey are the DevOps tribe. 6% are the AppSec, InfoSec tribe. So to kind of get a sense of, who's telling the truth or knowledgeable or what their perspective is, that's always interesting.
Yeah. I was wondering about the reporting aspect of it, so that makes a whole lot of sense. So, all right. Well, any parting words of wisdom?
Most of all, DevOps.com and Security Boulevard are part of the community survey as sponsors and supporters, as they have been for years. So tip of the hat to Charlene, you, Alan, and the rest of the crew who support us each year and help us get the word out about the survey, and also help us get word out about the results. So there will be, if the blogs haven't appeared on DevOps.com and Security Boulevard, they're on their way shortly. So you can check them out there, or just search DevSecOps Community Survey, and you'll be able to find the results.
Excellent. Well, Derek and DJ, thank you so much for your time walking me through the information. Yes, check DevOps.com, check Security Boulevard for the results of the survey coming very, very soon if it's not there already. But for now, thanks again for your time, guys. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
All right, guys, stay tuned. We'll have more TechStrong TV coming up.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
All right. Thanks, Charlene, and thanks to the Sonatype team for everything they do around All Day DevOps, the survey, and for coming on TechStrong TV today. Next up, we're going to head over to Mitchell at the Analyst Corner, where he's interviewing just an amazing guest by the name of Alan Schemmel. So Mitchell and I had a chance to speak about COVID-19 and Apple and Google's part in it. So we're going to talk about that.
This is Digital Anarchist.
All right, Alan Schemmel, TechStrong Studios here. So we're going to reverse the tables a little bit, and Mitchell is leading this interview as part of his Analyst Corner series. And so Mitchell, take it away.
Thank you very much, Alan. I wanted to talk about this announcement last week that Google and Apple and Google got together and are building some common technology for doing contact tracing. We're already seeing jobs coming out on the market called contact tracer. So this is a whole kind of cottage industry spearing out because of COVID, but also there's also technology solutions. So just a little bit of review, Alan. What they came out was a two-phased approach. They're using Bluetooth LE basically instead of near field or GPS to be able to have phones exchange anonymous identity information and identification keys, so that if you pass someone that had been tested positive for coronavirus, you would be notified that you have been in within certain distance of someone who's been tested positive, and then you can self-quarantine. Now they're doing this in two phases. First is creating some APIs that they will integrate into Android and iOS. They're planning to launch in May, and then that'll be just for public health authority applications. So there's already a COVID application you can use today to test answer questions to see if you potentially have the coronavirus. And that initial apps will be on the App Store, iOS and Google Play. Then there's a second phase where they're really adding the contact tracing phase of this into the core iOS and Android operating systems, where they'll extend some of that capabilities where they'll be able to measure this contact tracing individuals, and more people can participate. And I assume there may be third-party applications that potentially could be part of this. If I just add one more thing, I think it's interesting, good, and also raises lots of questions that they're doing this. I suspect it's not just all good. Apple and others tend to be kind of jumping out in front of things to avoid regulation. Let's get out there, protect privacy, transparency, and consent of users before regulation forces something on them. So it brings up memories, Alan, of 9/11 and Patriot Act, and we've kind of been down this road for different reasons. Yeah.
Well, the road to perdition.
What do you remember about that?
The road. What do I remember is that the road to perdition is lined with good intentions. That's what I remember, right? It was the right reasons to do the Patriot Act, but given the hands of a potentially corrupt or disingenuous administration or corporate entity, it can be the potential for abuse is rampant. But Mitchell, let me back up a little on a couple things I wanted to bring to the table. First of all, so now we know what it takes to bring Apple and Google to the table together.
Pandemic.
A pandemic. But secondly, why is, when pigs fly, but why is contact tracing so important? And I don't know if everyone quite gets it, but the idea here is, I love these people who say, let's just open the economy. My power is absolute. I'm going to open. You could stand up on your lectern or podium until you're blue in the face, red in the face, orange in the face, whatever it is, right? But you can't open. The economy will open when people are confident enough to venture forth, to go back to a restaurant, to go to a crowded sports or theater, to do things where they're not going to be afraid of dying, right?
Exactly.
And so no one's going to wave a wand or push a button for that.
I totally agree.
Yeah. So when some more enlightened officials talk about how do we open things up, there's a couple of pillars that it's based on. Number one is ubiquitous testing. We need to know who's tested positive, who was positive and is now negative, who has antibodies to show that perhaps they had this and didn't know they had it, right? That's job one. Job two is, look, if we're going to open it up before a vaccine or anything or a good treatment is available, we know we're going to infect people. People are going to die. Resources will be strained. But how do you contain it? How do you minimize that impact? Testing and then contact tracing.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
When we do find someone who has it, you find a pocket of people within a community. How did it get in there? Who did they come in contact with so that we can corral this thing, right? You've got to build fences around it. And that is where the contact tracing comes in. Now, when I first read this, man, I thought it was ingenious, right? I didn't think of the privacy implications, the potential for abuse, Big Brother and everything else. But what a great idea. If cell phones are ubiquitous and between Google and Android, it's 99.8% of cell phones or whatever it is, right? There might be some old Windows phones out there, but or Blackberries, but
Not sure how many, but okay.
Well, I said 99.8, but anyway, if you could get something that works across that, man, that kind of solves that problem. And I'll be honest, I'll sign up today. I'll take the potential for abuse because I always feel like we could circle up a fence around the potential for abuse. But right now we need this.
Well, not to be just an Apple fanboy, but they do take protection and privacy. That's core of what their relationship with their customers. And if they violated that, especially in a coronavirus situation, there's two thoughts, Alan. One, I think it's absurdly ridiculous to say we're going to open up the economy in just a flash step. And the way the conversations I've had about it is, think where we are today. Today on this day we're recording, there's 30,000, almost 30,000 people that have died from this. That's from January through now. And that's from a few people coming into the country and starting the whole process. If you opened up things today, how many thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people have coronavirus still that we don't know about it? And we would have, I think, the current problem time 10. So it's got to be this slow roll kind of phased integration. And I thought about, what's going to happen? Are people going to get labeled as, I've had the virus, so I'm okay, and other people walk around in bubbles, to protect themselves, or not going out, or what's all they going to look like? So you've got to have some way of protecting yourself, and that technology, I think, is a decent attempt to do it.
I no doubt about it. Mitchell, you and I have both spent our careers in technology. And so we probably have a bias where we just think technology technology will find a way. Tech is strong. Tech strong. That's what we're on, right? And we'll solve the problem. And this is a potential problem solver. But like I say, so I'm sitting here, my Apple Watch on a Mac, talking to you. So who am I to talk? Yeah, who am I to talk about being an Apple fanboy? But and on my iPhone. But that being said, I lost faith in every corporate entity. They all have the potential for abuse, right? When you're ruled by profit. So maybe the present regime in Apple is a little more ethical, or the present regime in Google still believes in do no evil. But we've seen where this goes. We've seen where it goes. We've seen what happens when government gets involved.
Just as easily can go the other way. That's for sure.
So if you're going to do this, you got to put stuff in there. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Point about, you and I being very accepting of technology solutions. I think generationally there's true and not true. Younger folks in newer generations than you and I are very used to giving away privacy to get benefits. Not so much maybe people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s especially. They're particularly vulnerable to this. So what that acceptance in that generation could be to the benefit or to the detriment. I don't know. I'm not predicting anything, but it certainly brings up, long term. This data is out there forever once they capture it too. So to your point, someday could that be used against us? And all of you infected, non-infected separate here, and some of you go to Boulder, Colorado, and some of you go to Salt Lake City.
Some go to the camps.
Back to the stand, if you remember that that book.
Yeah. But there are safeguards we could build in. Is this a temporary thing that we do just until a vaccine is out? So maybe for the next 12 months or whatever. Right, and then wipe it, never to be used again. Sort of like destroying machine knowledge in Dune, right? They tried to get rid of the smart machines, the thinking machines. And if you ever watch the second conclusion of Dune, written by Frank Herbert's son and Kevin Anderson, you know that those machines didn't really die off. They come back, and so that's the issue. Is once that genie's out of the bottle, it gets real hard to put back in.
I've adopted the philosophy of nothing ever goes away. And not just because of the internet. Technology, COBOL programmers are in vogue, and there's probably code I've written 35 years ago that's still running today.
Absolutely. Well, Charlene did an interview today with the Linux Foundation on the need for COBOL programmers. So there's all of these things. But Mitchell, I go back to my law school days, which is where I had a constitutional law teacher who actually had come from Stanford, and he taught two other folks in constitutional law way before me. And their name was William Rehnquist and Sandra Day O'Connor. He taught them both at
I think I've heard of those names, yeah.
They did okay for themselves. He taught them both at Stanford. And this guy's name, I'll never forget, his name was Cyril Means, Professor Cyril Means. And he taught us that none of our constitutional rights are absolute.
No.
Our right to religion, our right to free press, our right to free speech, all of these things are not absolute. Because almost every great Supreme Court case that you look at that deals with these rights involves a balancing, right? Public good versus constitutional right. The right of one person versus the right of another person. Your rights shouldn't abuse or deprive someone else of their rights.
And so, what's better for the greater good?
Well, for the public good. Right, for the betterment of public good. So this is a classic case of balancing what are the rights here. And in my mind, the public good wins out over the potential abuse here for privacy.
I think it will for that reason. Just speaking personally, frankly, it's a concern of mine. Hey, I'm not in the 80 to 90 age group, but also I'm thinking about when I am going out after the stay-at-home is lifted, how do I protect myself? I'm willing to do something like this with Apple and Google for sure.
Absolutely. I think we have to.
To your point about constitutional law, and I would have loved to have been in a class like that. So much of what we're finding out now, and not to get too steeped in the politics of things, but a lot of the offices that people hold and the norms and things, that's all goodwill that we expect people to operate in that mode. And when they don't, it makes you realize that those things aren't codified into the Constitution or into law. That's how we hope that a president or Congress or whoever will operate, act in a certain way. And we're finding out that's not necessarily true. It's pretty easy to abuse it.
Mitchell, you know where I stand. We're living in a nightmare. So, all of everything we thought was normal is unnormal anymore. And I, for one, want to return to normal. But I'm
in that camp as well.
We'll leave our politics out of it.
Yeah, we don't want to lose half our audience.
No, or 38%, depends which poll you believe.
Yeah.
But, but yes, there is certainly the potential there, but I do think if we think it through, you can put up.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Seeing some of these cooperative things really happen, which I think is good.
I think that may wind up being if there's a silver lining in all of this, that may be that people's attitudes change, corporations' attitudes change, and we do realize we're all stuck on this one little blue dot in the speck of a universe, and we got to make it work, right? Just look at the NASA photos of pollution clearing up, and you can actually see things you haven't seen before. That is some of the good of it. But Mitchell, I'm going to give you mentioned taking it back to the beginning because we're going to wrap up. You mentioned, there are people who are advertising as contact tracing jobs.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't use technology to automate the heck out of this, there aren't enough, even with the 16 million people who are unemployed and we made all of them a contact tracer, or who filed for unemployment in the last 3 weeks, and we made all of them a contact tracer, it still wouldn't be enough, right?
Well, now you have people in the loop and think of every state is hiring those people. How many people know about the activities of everyone in the country? You talk about
my neighbor across the street does, but we call her Mrs. Kravitz. Yeah. Anyway, Mitchell, on that note, man, thanks for having me on the Analyst Corner.
Absolutely. Enjoyed our conversation, Alan. Take care.
All righty.
Be safe.
Be safe. Be strong. TechStrong. Hey, Mitchell Ashley on the Analyst Corner, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. We'll be right back with another segment.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Hey, thanks, Mitchell. That was a great interview. It's always, Mitchell and I have been contemplating things like this since we worked together and from 2001 on. So it's always good to kind of shoot the breeze, share ideas, and stretch our minds with Mitchell. Next up, though, speaking of stretching our minds, is Mike Vizard, giving us a roundup, channel roundup. Mike, of course, covers channels for 20 plus years. And he's been doling out some great advice and great information on this channel roundup edition he does a couple times a week. So let's hand it over to Mike Vizard.
Hey, thanks, Alan. So, things are still a little bit of a mess out there from a financial perspective, that is for sure. There's supposed to be more money flowing through the system, but it seems to be choking up, and it's not clear to me that a lot of it is going to find its way into IT budgets. ISG's got a survey out talking about how 60% of the organizations that they surveyed will be delaying IT purchases at least through the end of the year, and who knows if those things will ever come back. Add that to the many small businesses that may not come back at all, and things are a little problematic. Unfortunately, we're looking at a lot of gridlock in Washington these days. I have heard of some instances where people are getting funding through the banks, and some of them seem to be mostly in the healthcare and medical space. Other people are saying they've gotten loans that are close to being approved, but I talked to some other folks that I know who work in banks, and some of them who specialize in small businesses, and they're only working on these things, but because they're doing the credit checks and the government hasn't quite been clear with them on what the requirements are or regulations are, they processed a grand total of 250 last week in terms of applicants. And at that rate, we're not going to really make a dent in this thing. I think people forgot that the purpose of this thing was to keep people employed, and instead we're kind of treating it like it's a regular run-of-the-mill loan program. There is some good news. Cisco is making available $2.5 billion in funding that can be used to defer the payment of acquisition of gear through the end of the year. So that should be a huge lift for a lot of organizations where, frankly, they just don't have the cash on hand to fund an IT project. So that's going to be great for partners to help drive that through. That, of course, comes on the heels of an HPE announcement, similar, for $2 billion. And it looks like the IT vendor community will probably step up to the plate here in a significant way. Of course, these guys have to be big companies with big pockets that can really handle this kind of investment. And we're also starting to see some, well, I'm not quite clear what to make of this, but Intel announced that they would be extending points and credits and various things to partners as well. That's not quite the same thing as putting together a massive aid package, but I guess every little bit helps, even though Intel seems to be making money hand over fist because, well, nobody can find a PC lately, so eventually that all goes back to them. There are some other interesting things out there you should pay attention to. Splunk, for example, has created a dashboard for its analytics platform that is specifically optimized for IT teams that have to remotely manage large workforces. So it monitors things like, how are the VPN connections doing, and what is the impact on access to cloud applications. This, of course, is front and center issue for all the IT organizations, and a lot of these calls that they're fielding have to do with the user experience now that all these people are working at home and they're using shared internet, and no one quite knows if the problem is on the IT side or if it's on the service provider side or somewhere in the middle. So I think you might want to look at this Splunk tool if you have access to it. Of course, a lot of people will be replacing their service desks. We're going to see that because it's just too hard to support all these remote workers. A lot of these things are 5 to 10 years old. Big Panda has seen this as an opportunity and has rolled out a free instance of their platform for 90 days. And their idea is that, well, they'll admit that no one's going to replace their service desk overnight. But what they're saying is people will be considering that. And there are those out there who are sorely pressed who may want to do something quickly. It's an opportunity for partners to take a look at another company who's in this space, and we'll see what happens next. Finally, ConnectWise is offering some free cybersecurity training. Basically, they're saying we're moving these courses online, and these are the variations of the courses they used to give on premise. I'm sure they're also going to be charging, but what they're really saying to folks is, hey, now is a good time to move all this stuff online. If you have people sitting at home in the channel who aren't quite working at full speed, maybe you might want to up-level their skills around cybersecurity. This is not an in-depth program. It's really designed to educate people on the base level, lowest level maybe of cybersecurity, but it's a start. And if you got folks at home, they might be able to wind up doing things like cybersecurity policies. I don't think they'll be hunting for malware anytime soon, but it'll be interesting to see how many other companies step up with free training for partners. I think that's going to be a huge opportunity, because if we're going to be down, then let's invest in our people, at least if we can afford to. And with that, thanks, Alan. Talk to you soon.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey, thanks, Mike, very much. All right, Alan Schimmel back here in the TechStrong TV studio. Guys, that was a wrap for our show today. I hope you enjoyed it. There was a lot, another just jam-packed with segments edition of TechStrong TV. We'll be back tomorrow to wrap the week up for Friday, April 17th. And I hope you enjoyed it. Let us know on the Slack channel what you're thinking. But until tomorrow, be healthy, be well, be strong. TechStrong. We're out.